The Kansas City Chiefs could not show up, unfortunately, for their preseason game against the Seattle Seahawks, and instead they sent a bucket of turds. Now, this was an S show. It was always going to be an S show. It does not mean anything for the regular season. It does not hold any weight towards anything, but unfortunately, it seems that they did lose a prime opportunity to really evaluate anything on the offensive side of the ball. And I have this down as one of the notes for the wide receivers here, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about it up front because I guess this is probably what I need to address first. No, Patrick Mahomes did not need to play in this game. Yes, putting Patrick Mahomes out there was going to be something of a risk for the season. If I could offer any criticism really about this, it would be that if we knew so early that Patrick Mahomes was not going to be on the field, then so too did the players probably earlier than did we. And because they did, it seems that everyone kind of took this game as a night off. And there were a lot of things at play. It was a Friday night game. It was 9 o'clock p.m. for their bodies, right? They're used to the Midwest time frame because they've been practicing in St. Joe. The weather was not the greatest. So there was a lot of things going on. They were shorthanded on both sides of the ball, but it did not look good at all on either side of the ball. And I think that they lost an opportunity to do much evaluation at all from this game. I don't think you can really look at very much from that night and say, all right, we're making a decision based on X, Y, and Z. So this is something that I'm probably going to talk about much more on the defensive video than on the offensive side of things. But if a player misses an assignment on a football field, it's a bad play. If two players miss an assignment on a football field, it can become a disaster very fast. But when there's three or more players missing an assignment on the play, it's basically a free-for-all. So there's nothing. So if you are, for example, let's say you are Rashard Smith and it is 3rd and 8 and you are being counted on to pass block on that down. Very unlikely, but let's just humor me. You're being counted on to pass block. And all of a sudden, Ezapole, Hunter Nourzad, and CJ Hansen all miss their... No, okay, I'm an idiot. You're Rashard Smith and you're supposed to run out into the flat. That's the play. Snap of the ball, you're supposed to head out to the flat. You're the pressure release valve. Ball is snapped. Ezapole, Hunter Nourzad, CJ Hansen all miss their blocks. What are you going to do? Are you going to let Bailey Zappi get absolutely annihilated, or are you going to try to hit one of those defensive linemen / linebackers? Well, if you hit one of those defensive linemen / linebackers, you forfeited your assignment. That's a bad grade. But you probably made the right decision. So there's very little grading that can be done there. So I think that the unfortunate thing about this game is that it was just so miserable on both sides of the ball every snap. Now, oftentimes in the current setup of the preseason, that's what the 3rd preseason game is for, in the same way that it used to be the 4th preseason game. So maybe it's not the worst of all scenarios, but strategically, if you're looking at the overarching goal of the preseason, I don't know where the Chiefs go from here. Because that first week, you have a long travel and you are playing a divisional rival. I don't know what the weather is like in Brazil right now. It's Southern Hemisphere, so they're in winter, right? So I don't really know if that's going to be a factor. I would imagine it's going to be a factor. But you have to now game plan for that 3rd preseason game, knowing it's your last preseason game. So there are things you do have to figure out. I just don't know, right? I think that the 3 preseason has all of a sudden, and I don't think it's just in Kansas City, everyone kind of had a formula for the 4 preseason games, right? We've gone over this before. First preseason game, depending on where you are in your franchise, the starters either run a series or a quarter. The second preseason game is either a quarter or a half. The third preseason game, your guys are going basically a whole game. And then that fourth preseason game, you didn't really do anything. That was kind of the game plan around the NFL. But in this new paradigm, I don't, because the Seahawks were playing that like a playoff game last night, and God bless them, celebrating everything on the sideline, running onto the field, maybe a tad embarrassing, but they were excited, they were engaged, they were there. The Chiefs seemingly did not show up. It's like that famous interview with Joaquin Phoenix on David Letterman, where he was just kind of stonewalling Letterman, and then basically like 3/4 or halfway through the interview, David Letterman says, "Well, Joaquin, I'm sorry you couldn't be here tonight," right? That was kind of what we were looking at in that game, but we do have some things to talk about, so let's get into it. On the offensive line, I thought that Josh Simmons looked a little bit rougher than he did last week. I think he only quote-unquote lost 1 rep again, but he had a couple of rougher reps, and that's to be expected, right? The Seahawks have a stronger defensive front, from what I can tell, than do the Cardinals. And you were looking at a player in his second game in the NFL. So I don't think it's anything necessarily to worry about, but there will be, it's a necessary perhaps reminder that there will be some growing pains along the way. Speaking of growing pains, Kingsley Suamataia played. He did not have a good game, but he did not have the game that he had last week either. I thought that he did do some good things out there. I thought that he did look improved. I thought that he did look better, sort of picking things up, though I think there was one play where, now top of my head, I can't remember if that was Simmons or Ezapole. Somebody should have passed someone off, and they ended up basically with a straight shot to the quarterback. So I'll have to go back and see, but I think that was Ezapole and Hunter Nourzad. Kingsley is really interesting seeing Josh Simmons play next to Kingsley Suamataia, because it really highlights the problem with Kingsley. He's starting, I think, to regress into Darian Kennard. Darian Kennard did not move his feet, and I think that is the problem that we're having largely with Kingsley Suamataia. Neither of these players did the agility drills coming out of college, so the 20-yard short shuttle and the 3-cone drill, but I am willing to bet that is where we would have seen a world of difference between these two athletes. Kingsley didn't do it probably because he was not going to score particularly well, and Simmons didn't do it because he didn't do any of the movement drills at all. So Simmons has elite feet, and Kingsley Suamataia does not. So I think that is where we are seeing a lot of that sort of disconnect there, and why he is no longer probably ever going to be an offensive tackle. He could have a long career, Kingsley Suamataia. He does have the build to have a long career. He does have the tools to have a long career. I don't know if he has the conditioning to have a long career. That is one thing I think we started to see, is wearing down, which is extremely troubling. I think he played 10 or 11 snaps in this game. So if you were wearing down at that point, now one thing that's going to be interesting as we get into the season, the Chiefs do have the ability to rotate offensive linemen. The entire time that Andy Reid has been here, they haven't done any rotation along the offensive line. It has been, if you were one of the starters, you better be prepared to play 100% of the snaps. They have the ability now to rotate. So maybe you have Jalen Moore in there for a series at right tackle. You have Jalen Moore in there for a series at left guard. They talk a lot about having to gel on the offensive line, things like that, but there is an opportunity here to at least toy with that early in the season to see if you can figure something out. I was speaking about Ezapole earlier. I thought he had another good game because of his weight. And I think I think that he and Dalton Cooper have put on weight since their college days. And maybe it's something in the water in St. Joe, because there's been a lot of players that look notably bigger than I remember. But because of his weight distribution, he might not ever have elite feet. He has a big front porch, and that might stop him from being particularly effective with his feet. But there were a couple of times that he got beat by speed and did a good job of not getting beat fast. And what he did was so Ezapole does not have technique, just doesn't. He is an instinctive blocker out there, and it's going to be interesting because you see this a lot with quarterbacks. You saw this with David Carr when he got into the NFL. They tried switching this, switching that. You might remember, so he was the first pick of the expansion Houston Texans. One of the things they did, because he had a 3/4 release, is they put up 8 feet ladders behind the defensive line during drills in training camp. So if you're doing that 3/4 release, you're going to be throwing things straight into a ladder. And he never recovered. Just never recovered. He was not the quarterback that he could have been. He was throwing instinctively. They tried to make him throw by technique. Thankfully, that never happened with Patrick Mahomes. One of the things that can end up happening when you try to make a guy technique sound, when he is instinctively not impressive, maybe, but he is instinctively productive, right? If you try to make him into a technique guy, maybe he learns hand technique, but he never gets around to learning foot technique. And if your body is out of conjunction like that, all of a sudden, you're not effective at all. So it'll be interesting to see how they decide to do this, because one of the things that he was doing when he got beat by speed, he just ever-loving shoved the guy. Well, now guess what? That guy is in much worse position because Ezapole is a pretty strong cat. So he puts all of his strength into you. You had him beat with speed, and now you're further downfield and you have to adjust what you're doing. So that was interesting to see. That is a very instinctual move. But one of the other things that I saw from him that I don't know that I have ever seen, because it's extremely disadvantageous for an offensive lineman, but man, it's kind of effective. Again, an instinctual blocker. There were times where he just outright put his shoulder into a guy's chest. Now that's extremely disadvantageous for an offensive lineman, because this is where you have your extension, is where you have all of your control. Most of the reps, you're not getting to full extension anyway. Most of the reps, you don't have to get to full extension. Most of the reps, the real win is that your guy never got to the quarterback, or your guy didn't make the tackle. And he just putting your shoulder into a guy's chest like a linebacker kind of stops their momentum. Now, if you're going against a more effective defensive lineman, one of these elite edge players, probably he's just going to swipe you away. But it was interesting to see that come out from a guy, because I don't think I've ever seen it before from an offensive line. I mean, just like, remember the Conor McGregor Cowboy Cerrone match, where Conor kind of came back after the Floyd match, and Cerrone had wrapped him up and had caught both of his arms under his, right? And Conor just said, all right, and pulled him in and broke Cowboy's nose. That was kind of what it looked like. Hunter Nourzad and CJ Hansen, I thought both had rough games. I don't know if that was a communication thing. There were times where it looked like they were just not in sync on the field. This is what happens in a game where you are basically just, I think all anyone was doing out there was tracking their assignment. So when you're tracking your assignment as an offensive lineman and the defensive line shifts or there's a blitzer, whatever, and you don't pick it up, well, now the other guy doesn't think he has to pick it up either. It just seemed like everything was out of whack. Dalton Cooper looked the part of a right guard. I wasn't sure he would have the bend, but he does, in my opinion, look decent out there. It could be another good week so he was an offensive tackle in college. So when I made that video last week, it's because all three of those players had played offensive tackle in college. But Cooper seems to be on the track for guard in the NFL. I think that both Pole and Cooper, after a year on the practice squad, could be legitimate players at the NFL level. I think that as a Pole, man, do you go with technique or effectiveness? I hope he doesn't get ruined, but he does have, it seems like, pretty extreme upside. At the running back position, I think that Isaiah Pacheco is going to return to last year's early season form. We have seen more shiftiness. We have seen more speed. We have seen better vision. That is the big thing with Isaiah Pacheco, is it has always seemed that his vision was lacking and he would just run straight into somebody's back. That will be a good thing for the offense, especially if they are as successful as I think they could be and they end up scoring a lot of points, because then they will be able to run the clock out in a way that the last time the Chiefs had an explosive offense, they couldn't. And that's why all those teams were able to come back. The Chiefs have now for 2 years, better part of 3 years, had a not great offense. And they have learned a lot of those close out the game techniques when they didn't have to before. They learned them under fire and duress when they had to. And now they have them. And if they can employ those close out the game techniques with an explosive offense, it might be pretty easy sailing through part of the schedule. This game marks the first time this preseason that I have questions whether or not Elijah Mitchell will make the roster over Carson Steele. I don't think because of anything that necessarily Elijah Mitchell did or did not show on the field. He was largely ineffective running the ball. But starting to think that maybe the Kansas City Chiefs just want another steel hammer at the running back position, another battering ram back there. But that is, of course, if Brashard Smith can shine, because they do need, I think they do want to have a speed threat, receiving threat running back. I think they would really like to have two of them, but I don't know. It's just going to be an interesting few days leading up to cut day. What is it? 9 days away? 10 days away? 11 days away? Something like that. Like a week and a half. We're about a week and a half away from cut down day. And it's going to be interesting to see what the Chiefs prioritize, because I think we kind of have a pretty good idea of which players are better or worse than others, but we don't know exactly what it is that they're going to be looking for for their game plan, etc. And then that curveball of the Rashee Rice suspension not happening, or at least not happening to start the season, is a wicked one as far as planning your season out is concerned. At wide receiver, I do not care about the punt return. Sky Moore is past tense. You do not blank out when you had 2 passes in your hands and expect to make the roster. I do not care. Hopefully someone around the NFL fell in love with the look of that punt return, and the Chiefs can get a 2032 7th round pick out of Sky Moore. I just don't care. I'm tired of talking about Sky Moore. I think that we have to remember that there's wide receivers bust a lot. Wide receivers bust a lot. And just is what it is. I do think that he might be more effective somewhere else in the NFL. Perhaps it is this offense that just is not for him. This is where I was talking about it's a shame that Mahomes didn't play because there's just not a whole lot of evaluation to do of these wide receivers. Jason Brownlee got a lot of reps. I do not know how well he will grade out from them, right? You had I don't even know how many completions. Like, the stat sheet isn't even worth looking at for this game. The most impressive offensive player by the stat sheet is probably Brashard Smith because he has a decent average. Maybe Carson Steele because he got quite a few carries. But outside of that, I just don't know what you do with this stat sheet. I just don't think there's anything there. At the tight end position, Bobby Tons continues to impress. I do think the Chiefs will enter this season with 4 tight ends on the roster. That seems to be their MO. That seems to be something they want to do. So having him at the tight end position. So Jared Wiley got in before him, I think. I don't know that there's too much to read into that because I think a lot that they're going to be doing with the tight end is not depth chart related. It's going to be situation related. So where Robert Tonyan is on the depth chart, I don't think is really going to mean a lot because Robert Tonyan is going to block in a way that none of the other tight ends on the roster is going to be able to block. I think it's going to be interesting to see which tight ends they go with in their 3 tight end sets. Because if you go into a 3 tight end set with Kelsey, Gray, and Tonyan, it might be a run. If you go into a 3 tight end set with Kelsey, Gray, and Wiley, probably it's a passing situation, right? So, will there be sets for 3 tight ends with Gray, Tonyan, and Wiley? Save Kelsey some wear and tear out there. I think that would be interesting. I think that if the Chiefs are in the position where they are able to do that, it is an extreme luxury. 3 tight end sets without the best tight end in the history of football on the field, right? And the final note that I have for the offense in this game, this coaching staff has not given up on Jared Wiley the way that some in the fan base have. I haven't given up on Jared Wiley. I think that he had a rough start to his rookie season and then got injured. 1 reception for 12 yards he had last year, but I don't think that that's anything necessarily really to judge him on. This year, a stacked tight end room could be problematic for his prospects, but I think that he will make strides this year. You see the athleticism when he's on the field. He looks like a wide receiver. He looks like a big wide receiver out there. He looks the same size as Jason Brownlee, but he does look like a big wide receiver. So will he be the heir apparent to Travis Kelce? It's hard to say at this point. No one's going to be Travis Kelce, but if they can find someone who is a speed type receiving threat at the tight end position, for which Travis Kelce does not get the respect that he deserved early in his career. But if they can find somebody that does add a speed element at that tight end position, it could be a way for this offense to move forward and not fall off following the departure of Travis Kelce. Kyle Pitts, by the way, I believe is a free agent after this season. So that is what it is. I will dangle that out there. That is all I have for this video. On your screen right now will be 2 playlists and a video that YouTube thinks you will like. And hey, don't argue with AI. That stuff will remember you. I hope to have you back for the next one.